What's up, guys? This is Brian Graham again with the Smart Real Estate Investment Podcast. This is episode 5, talking about learning different real estate investment strategies. For some reason, my live stream is not working on Facebook. So if you're interested in watching live stream, at least for the time being, we are on YouTube, X. Also trying to figure out Instagram. For some reason, that's also not working. Twitch and Kick. So if you're interested in watching the live stream, you can watch any of those. If not, you can also just check out the podcast, which will be launching January 1st. The first episode will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, etc. Also, if you are interested in following me on social media, you can go to my Twitter at REIBrian5, or you can go to my Instagram, and in there you can find the link tree or link space and follow me on social media and connect with me. And there'll be a contact sheet. You can ask questions. I respond to emails very quickly, or you can just shoot me a tweet or a DM. I'd be happy to help or answer some questions. As always, we begin every podcast episode with a disclaimer, because nowadays you get sued for everything. So I'm not a financial advisor, and the information provided during our sessions is not intended as financial, legal, or professional advice. It is your responsibility to conduct thorough due diligence, seek the advice of qualified professionals, and make informed decisions based on your individual financial situation and goals. So again, this is the podcast episode number 5, Smart Real Estate Investment Podcast, learning different real estate investment strategies. So to begin with, we're just going to dive right into it. Buy and hold. Very simple. This is when you take some saved up money, you take money from investors, partners, you buy a property, and your objective is to hold it long term, coming with all of the benefits of holding those long-term properties, which are, you're looking for appreciation value. The tenant is going to be paying down your equity. You get tax benefits. Usually the money that you make, the profit, is sheltered through things like depreciation and appreciation value. So you get the appreciation value, cash flow, tax benefits, and equity pay down. So it's pretty typical. That is your cookie cutter, simplest way to buy long-term buy and hold investment properties. So typically that's anywhere between 15 to 25% down, depending on the type of property you're buying. If it is a single-family home, most investors, or most banks rather, will let you buy with 15% down. If you are buying a duplex, triplex, or quadplex, you're going to be required to put at least 20 to 25% down. Usually those multifamily properties are 25%. You can also work with companies now that do private lending. The interest rates are going to be a little higher. You can also do DSCR loans, which are interest rates are also going to be a little higher. But what we're going to do is we're going to be doing some another podcast episode specifically talking about lending and the different types of products that certain lenders have based on my experience. Of course, I can't cover all of them because that's the responsibility of a lender, but we can touch the surface just so you guys can understand what products are out there and to your benefit. The next would be fix and flip. So fix and flip properties, buying a property that is distressed, renovating them, and then selling them for a profit. Now, there are some things to understand here. Many people, specifically Americans, are looking at this going, oh, I can do fix and flip because I watched it on HGTV. And it's very, very important to understand that you are not seeing the big picture, rather the whole picture that HGTV offers you. You see investor buys for $100,000, puts 50 into it, property worth 400. You're like, wow, $250,000 profit. That's insane. Usually that's not how it goes. You have to find a distressed property or a property that is in a very, very, person's in a very difficult situation. Then when you renovate it, you have to figure out how you're going to renovate it. Are you going to hire a company? Are you going to do it yourself? Are you even knowledgeable enough to do it yourself? How much time is that going to take you? Because if you have a job, you're going to have to do it outside of that job. That's going to take time. Where are you in the country? Because the cost of that renovation is going to be dependent on where you are, the cost of living usually in that area. If you're in a rural part of the United States, you're probably paying, 50 to 60% of what it would cost you if you're doing the renovation in some major city. That's important. The costs need to be evaluated. So fix and flip, yes, you can make a lot of money. It also is going to take more time out of your day because fix and flip would be considered that of a quote unquote job. Because it takes your time to find the property. It takes your time to manage the person, or yourself takes your time to renovate the property. It takes time to manage a person renovating the property. Then you've got to account for the holding costs of that property. So you buy a property for, let's say, $100,000, and let's say you have the cash. You're all in for $100,000 out of your own money. Let's say you've got the $50,000 to also pay for the renovations. But sooner or later, if you don't sell that property, you got to pay the taxes on that property. You got to pay the insurance on that property. So there are holding costs. You got to pay the electric bill. You got to pay the water bill. You got to pay all of those bills that come associated with holding costs. That eats into your profit margin. Once you sell that property, how are you going to sell it? Are you going to sell it yourself? Are you going to sell it with a real estate agent? Because then you got to factor in 6%. So it's very important to understand that fix and flip properties, yes, you can profit from those without a doubt. However, finding the ones where the profit margin is great enough that maximizes your time and value, that's important. That you got to factor that in. You have to. Just seeing that you can make, I can make $50,000 on a property, but then when you factor in the time it takes to do that, you factor in the cost of the real estate agent, you realize very quickly, I'm only going to make $5,000 from this property. Well, it's not worth risking $150,000 to make $5,000. You're better off just buying a buy and hold. So something to think about. The next investment strategy is wholesaling. So there's tons of social media out there where you're talking about how to wholesale. You can make a ton of money wholesaling. You're in a very similar situation to fix and flip. Here's the definition of wholesaling. I buy a property, or put it under contract, rather. I'm putting the property under contract. I make an offer, let's say for $100,000. I always like to use simple numbers. I put a property under contract for $100,000. Let's say it's market value, or it could be market value much more than that. I now go find an actual buyer, somebody that really wants to buy this, whether they want to renovate it, they want to live in it, whatever they want to do. And I tell them, you can buy this for $110,000. And they go, oh, wow, great. Well, now I assign that contract over to them for $110,000. I had it under contract for $100,000, and my net gain is $10,000. That's what wholesaling is. I'm taking that contract, I'm selling it to a different person, usually an investor, at a higher price. So the best way to do it is to find deeply discounted properties, and requires very strong negotiation skills to get that property under contract at a discount. So this would be something, you're finding a property that's in probate, somebody just passed away and the family wants to sell it and they're looking to get rid of it and get quick cash. You can get those properties pretty discounted. Something happens, the person dies and there is no family. You can often maybe get it from the bank or get it from whoever, maybe the lawyers in charge of selling that property, or the state rather. It could be that there's a divorce and then both parties want to sell that property very quickly. The property is destroyed, the bank is in foreclosure, and the person's in foreclosure, the bank is about to seize the property, and you call the bank and say, do you have a foreclosure list? And you offer them, some sort of discounted offer price, and they may or may not take you up on that, because banks are not in the business of owning real estate. Banks are in the business of lending money to own real estate. So that's also important to understand. They want to get their money back as quick as possible so they can lend it out and start earning a return. They're all about cash flow. So that is what wholesaling is. You can make good money on it, but the risks are If I get a property under contract for $100,000, you're going to have to submit an earnest money deposit. That might be $1,000. So you're risking $1,000. If you don't find someone to assign that contract to, you could lose that $1,000, or you'd be forced to buy the property yourself. Those are the risks. Then there's commercial real estate investing. This would be anything 5+ units in the residential world, or it would be some other property where a business would be renting from you. Office buildings, retail spaces, industrial property, that kind of thing. Usually this requires a higher capital because the value of commercial real estate investing, of a commercial real estate property, is dependent on the amount of income it produces. So if you live in a community, in a residential community, and you have a 3-bed, 2-bath, and the appraisal is $100,000, most 3-bed, 2-baths within a certain radius will also be worth $100,000, usually in the same zip code. But if you, commercial real estate investing, you can't do that because every building is unique. This building leases space to Giant. This building leases space to Men's Warehouse, FedEx. They're all leasing space, so you can't value that piece of property the same as you can the next. What is usually dictated is the amount of rent those businesses pay on a price per square foot basis, but not the value itself of the entire building. So the entire building is dependent on the amount of income it produces. So when you're buying commercial real estate, that's why you may see, let's say Giant is renting space, which is, massive amount of square footage. You got Men's Warehouse and FedEx all next door to each other. It's a 3-unit building. That may cost $5 million because they're all paying $50,000. So at a certain cap rate, that it's determined by the cap rate divided by the net income, and then boom, you have your price of commercial real estate. It's actually income divided by your cap rate. So commercial real estate, you can make a ton of money. It is usually a very safe investment because these businesses are never going away. I mean, FedEx will always be a thing. Giant will always be a thing. Grocery stores will always be a thing. At least that's my opinion. But when you sign these companies, they're signing 10, 15, 20-year leases. So it's very reliable. And you can take it to a bank and say, Giant Food Company, a company that's been around for however long, is paying me X. And the bank will say, okay, great, we will lend you money to buy that building for that reason. So it can yield a higher return for that reason once you increase value, etc. So that's commercial real estate investing. Then you can go short-term vacation rental properties. So we talked about buy and hold. This would be buying rental properties in more tourist destinations for short-term rentals. In most cases, you're talking about Airbnb or VRBOs. So someone comes in, they spend $100 a night. You bought the property for $100,000. They may spend $50 to $75 a night, $100 a night, wherever the location is. Usually in a tourist destination, could be Orlando Disney World, could be Disneyland in California, etc., etc. Could be Memphis, Tennessee. People want to see, music in Nashville, whatever it is. Big cities, you have a property located nearby. Somebody wants to come in and bypass the hotel situation, and they want to rent from your Airbnb because it has a hot tub. So it's a private hot tub. It could have a pool. It could have, great amenities, whatever it is. It will usually require more on-hands management or higher paying the management company, a higher payment to the management company. And it is higher risk because, for example, in COVID, when no one was traveling, they took some hits. And then actually it started to skyrocket in value because then everyone started realizing, okay, I can work from anywhere. And then they started traveling to these tourist destinations and working remotely. And so it ended up working out for those Airbnb investors in that way. So then we fast forward 3 years later, and now here we are. And now that market's oversaturated, and I'm hearing that in certain markets, Airbnb investors are losing it. They're losing a lot of money because no one's renting because the economy is struggling a bit, and so no one wants to rent in those short-term places anymore. There's not as much traveling going on from that Airbnb perspective. So it is higher risk. There is higher reward. The next one is seller financing. What does that mean? I have a property that that I own free and clear, and somebody wants to buy that property from me but may not have a lot of money. So I can act as the bank and they could give me a small down payment, and I'm lending them the rest of the money to buy it from me through owning that property cash. And so usually, we can work out terms, but since it's private lending as well, I can charge them maybe a little bit higher interest rate or lower interest rate depending on what I'm looking for. We can do balloon payments any term. And then they could buy that property from me, paying me a monthly income. So I can use that contract to secure the deal through the property. So if they don't pay me, I act as a bank. I can foreclose on them just as a bank would foreclose on anybody, and I can retake the property. The next one will be what's called a lease option. This is where investors lease a property to a tenant with an option to buy it at a later date. Also, you're also agreeing on the price at that time. So I'll give you an example. I owned a property that cost me $160,000 to buy. This person, I gave a lease option, a 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year. I gave them 3 different options. And based on those 3 options were different pricing. I bought the property for $160,000. I offered them a 1 year lease option and to purchase the property 1 year later for $200,000. They decided not to do it. We went with a typical lease. Fast forward about 13 to 14 months, they ended up purchasing the property from me for $230,000. So they chose not to give me the down payment at the beginning, and therefore resulted in me getting $30,000 more than I had offered, just because they didn't want to commit to that. So the benefit to the buyer is you're guaranteed by signing a lease option, you're virtually guaranteed a higher appreciation at a later date. That person has vested interest in the property. They're going to take care of it because they're going to buy it from you later. But that person decided not to, and if they don't take it and the property happens to appreciate more, then whenever you sell it, you made more money. So a lease option can be beneficial for both parties depending on how you look at it and if you say yes or not. The next one is tax lien investing. A tax lien is when a person would purchase a tax lien on a property that has delinquent taxes. So every county in the United States requires you to pay taxes on a property. The tax lien is the only lien, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but I believe it's the only lien, actually could be 2 or 3 more, that supersede a mortgage lien. So if you don't pay your mortgage, the mortgage puts a lien on your property. But there are other liens, like the property taxes. If you don't pay your property taxes, the county puts a tax lien on your property. That is why when you go get a mortgage and you pay taxes and insurance through your mortgage payment, it comes from the escrow account from the mortgage company. They are willing to pay the taxes and insurance on your behalf, because if you do not pay the taxes and someone else buys that tax lien and goes through the proper channels, they could foreclose on your property and the bank loses their money, you lose the property, and that person could buy your property for pennies on the dollar. So the general rule of thumb is that taxes are about 1% of the home price. So if the home costs $100,000, every year the taxes cost $1,000. If you are delinquent on your taxes, I could purchase a tax lien after 1 year for $1,000, and then once I go through the proper channels, I could probably end up paying between $2,000 and $3,000 and foreclose on you if you never pay the taxes or the bank doesn't pay me the taxes. I would then go to the county, buy the tax lien, foreclose, and now I own your $100,000 property for between $2,000 and $3,000. Tax lien investing is often referred to as the sleeping giant of real estate investing. The next one is called private lending. So this would be where the investor acts as the lender. So if you don't have a lot of cash, you could maybe pool some cash together from other people and act as private lenders. So remember this, the bank will never loan you money to buy their own stock, but they will lend you money to buy real estate. That tells you what they believe is the best investment. So if you are interested in real estate investing but don't want to be a landlord, then you can act as someone's bank. So you and a team of players, or if you have enough cash, you can lend someone money and be the mortgage company. And you can receive cash flow at whatever interest rate based on probably the prime interest rate of the United States at the time, maybe what you're competitive to what other banks are doing. But you would vet that person just as the bank would, and then you would lend the money for them to buy the property, and then they pay you a monthly mortgage payment. And then it is up to you or that person to pay those taxes, pay the insurance, because if you don't, you can end up with a tax lien and someone could purchase it out from under both of you. So I very much recommend that if whatever strategy you choose or you're interested in, you learn as much as you possibly can about that strategy. My strategies, there are other strategies, but my favorite strategy is a buy and hold, the BRRRR method, the BRRRR, which I'm going to talk about in a separate podcast. I did not talk about that strategy in this podcast, but I want to talk about it in a different one because I did think they all deserve their own individual. And then tax lien investing and seller financing. I think some of those are the best ways. Those are my personal favorite ways to invest in real estate. So I appreciate you guys watching again. That is episode 5, learning different real estate strategies of the Smart Real Estate Investment Podcast. And at the end of every podcast, we like to go over some of the questions that have been asked of us on social media over the course of the last week, as well as answer some live viewer questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type in the comments, or if you're on the real estate podcast on the Twitter space, go ahead and raise your hand so I know anyone would like to ask any questions. But from Instagram, we had a couple comments about liquidity, and if liquidity was ever a good idea. Like, would it ever be a good idea to sell a home as quick as possible? And it always depends. But if it ever came a moment where you needed to sell a property extremely quick and it was a cash buyer, the negative to real estate investing, it is not that liquid. It would take at least 7 days to sell that property. However, that is also the benefit of real estate investing, because you don't need emotional stability to invest in real estate because it's not that liquid. Prices fluctuate up and down. The market fluctuate up and down. But what is always consistent is that somebody needs a place to live. And no matter how much your property is worth, somebody's going to need a place to live with a roof over their head, and you can charge them a rent for that. So if you buy it for $100,000 and it's worth 50, or it's worth $200,000, the rent is going to be the rent at the time, and you can charge somebody for that. So I appreciate you guys watching again. If you go to my Twitter or Instagram, you can find the link tree and follow me on all socials, including joining our Discord, where you can ask more questions and I interact with people on there. I also have a coaching business through the Discord. Feel free to ask me any questions, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. We won't be streaming live again for about 2 weeks, and I will see you guys in episode 6. All right, appreciate it. Thanks.